Welcome to the panel on the diaspora in the global south. So we have three game developers here, three people from the games industry from different parts of the world, and I'll allow them to introduce themselves and we'll get started. So can we start with Eka?
Hi there, I'm Chandana Ekanayaka, or Eka. I was born in Sri Lanka and moved to the US as a child with my family during the Civil War. I've been in games for 23 years, a long time. I'm co-founder and studio head of Outer Loop Games. We're a 13-person indie studio in Seattle, Washington.
And Jess?
My name is Jessica. I'm from Singapore. I moved to Canada at 16, so a pretty late immigrant, so that should be interesting to discuss, I guess. I've been in games for maybe 8 years as a concept artist. Some of the stuff I worked on includes Call of Duty and most recently Star Wars Squadron. Interested to be here.
Nice. And Lou?
Hi, I'm Lu Nascimento. I'm from Brazil and I moved to Canada when I was 19, and then from Canada I moved to the UK when I was 20. And I've been working in the games industry for roughly seven years now. I worked as an artist for 10, and I'm currently co-founder and art director of Bunny Hug. And yeah, we're a pretty international team, and I used to work at Chocofist before that, and I worked on Time Spinner and More Groove, and yeah.
Nice. So you guys have different experiences from different parts of the world, and moving to different parts of the world as well. Would you guys be able to tell us what the diaspora means to you? Let's start with Lou, and you can pass it on to the next person.
It's for me particularly, it's hard to define. I kind of like moved. I feel like many of us at least move trying to look for a better life, a safer place, even a place that actually has jobs in the industry that we want, which was the three were my case. I kind of like, as soon as I could, I kind of ran away from Brazil after a bad experience. And yeah, so for me, what it meant was security, but also it means loads of challenges and trying to adapt to a whole new culture. Yeah, it's really hard for me to define it. I never thought of it much besides I'm safe now, so it's all good. If anyone else wants.
Yeah, you can pass it on to anyone, or I'll say, Jess, would you like to tell us what the diaspora means to you?
I mean, I think the definition is pretty similar to Lou's. I think a lot of it has to do with like people wanting to move from their place of origin to like a better place, either for safety or for, whatever reasons, like economical reasons, family reasons, whatever reasons. But basically, I think to me, it's like you're moving to a place that's not of your main cultural background, I guess. So that's really broad for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Similar things for me. My parents, I have an older brother, younger sister. So when I was about 8, we moved to the US from Sri Lanka. There was a civil war going on for a long time. And my parents, my dad had a career there, but he didn't feel safe bringing the kids up. So we decided to move to the US. We had some relatives there. So it was definitely a culture shock. I didn't speak English. Really, I think it's easier as a child, but like, it was definitely like, when I think back growing up Sri Lanka to living in the US, it feels like two different worlds completely. But for us, a similar thing was just safety and a better quality of life was the hope for my parents.
Nice. Well, yeah, you did touch on the definition. all of you, well, which is moving outside of your country of origin. Would you be able to tell us about the histories, about your histories before you moved out of your country in a bit more depth, and about your heritage? I'll start with Chanda, Eka, and you can pass it on to anyone.
Sure. I mean, we had a pretty comfortable life. I mean, it's it wasn't, we weren't really wealthy or really poor. We lived in an okay house, and my parents, my dad worked on the post office. My mom stayed home. It was comfortable as far as I knew. It was fine. Like, I didn't know any better. Like there was a looming civil war going on. So there was a lot of sort of worry about that. And there are times where we had curfews and things. So we couldn't, there was a time in Sri Lanka where it was very nationalistic. So like there were things we can get things imported and things like that. But for me, as a child, if my parents did a good job of protecting us and sheltering us. So that's all I knew, right? Growing up in Sri Lanka, and I spoke Sinhala and went to school, and it was about second, third grade when we decided to move. But it was really culturally went from that to the U.S., where there was just a lot of different cultures. Sri Lanka is predominantly Buddhist, and that's where I grew up. And there's some smaller other sort of religions and types of people, but it's like 80% of the country is Sri Lankan Buddhist. That was my experience. Luz?
Me?
Sure.
Yeah. So my family used to be really well off, and then after I was born, that wasn't the case anymore. So we grew up with struggling quite a bit. Like a lot of Brazilians, I'm mixed, and that comes with some difficulties, but not as much as people think. And my family, they fought a lot so we could have really good education. So even though we were struggling financially a lot, I got the scholarships, and my family worked many hours to be able to pay for our private school. And that was a huge contrast. I was a kid from a family that was struggling a lot on a primarily white school, which made me go through a lot of bullying. But it's something that, looking back, it's fine, I guess. It's nothing that traumatizing. My main concerns when I was living in Brazil and from the moment that in societies as I became a woman, the main concern was safety as a woman. We went through the crime wave in Brazil was always very intense. So there is always stalking and being pulled on the streets, and something much more intense than we would call catcalling. And the moment before I moved out was I was kidnapped, and I got lucky that the kidnappers were actually sentenced. But the moment that I left Brazil was after the sentence ended, and they had promised to come after me. So I tried to find a way of running away. And from that, I packed everything, and I went as a tourist to Canada, and I stayed there while I was looking for a job in the UK, so I could actually officially move and feel safe and be able to go back to Brazil as a person that is visiting and seeing family, rather than someone that is always concerned about their safety. Yeah, but I had growing up, I was really, really lucky with an incredibly supportive family. They were fighting for me a lot. They were working to give me the best life they could. And I think if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't even be able to move, because they supported me throughout this entire thing.
Are you better now? Do you feel safer now?
Definitely. There's still that little head thing that that your head goes a lot of nowhere and say, oh, you're not safe, but you're actually safe. Like I actually get to look at my surroundings and like, I'm fully safe. Everything is fine. It's great. Yeah. So
Our experience.
yeah, it was quite a relief to just
Yeah.
be able to look around and be safe.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. How about you, Jess?
Nothing quite as drastic, which I'm really glad for.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much the same as Eka. Like, my family's pretty average. Like, everything was like, we were comfortable, we were okay. But the choice to move wasn't like, it wasn't mine. It was my parents, I guess. But the thing is that when you grow up in Singapore, you become very aware of like the bubble that society kind of encapsulates itself in. Like, you're aware of what people expect you to do. You're kind of aware of what like people expect, what routes you're supposed to take, like the job safety and all that stuff. And it felt really stifling, to be very honest. And I actually didn't really experience racism for the first time until I moved to Canada. I mean, I was aware that this existed, but I didn't experience it like personally until I moved to Canada, because Singapore is I guess it's a Chinese dominated like Chinese Singaporeans are the majority population, so you don't really like, I didn't experience much of that, unfortunately. And also there's been some emphasis on like racial harmony, like you need to get along with people who look different from you, who have different cultures from you. So you have that kind of understanding of other people's cultures and traditions and try to get along with them. Yeah, but like when I moved to Canada, it was just like a culture shock, because the first thing that what I noticed in North America is that everybody's so focused on your race as a thing. Like it was, yeah, the focus was just like very off-putting. And also things like I already knew English, right? Like in Singapore, most people know English, different, like more than one language. Like most of the people of the world, they know more than one language. But when I arrived, it was like, oh, like your accent is so important. Like if you don't speak with the right accent, you just assume that your English is poor, your English is bad. And then my sibling actually got shafted into ESL because she wasn't speaking the right accent, which I think is absolute bullshit. Are we allowed to swear? This is a bit late, but
Yep.
but yeah, it's that kind of culture shock where people just kind of judge you on the surface, like what you look like or like how you sound like and all that stuff, which is kind of different from what I experienced. So that was a huge culture shock. And then my first high school, like when I went, it was like the majority of the population of the high school was like Black and brown people, which is, again, it's like a shock to me. Like I was okay with it, but it was just so weird because a lot of them haven't really interacted with like people who look like me, I guess. So it was a lot of like weird tiptoeing around, or like you didn't really understand stuff going on. And there was also a lot of like stereotyping where on both ends, I guess. Like my parents would be like, oh, everybody's dangerous, they're gonna shoot you. And I'm like, okay, no, just chill out, right? Because they're still people. And a lot of like what I got to realize was that a lot of the like problems that that so-called dangerous people face, whatever, it's because of stuff that was stacked against them. Like it's not their fault that they grew up in such situations. It's not their fault that they're in such environments. And a lot of the students that I met, like they were just actively just trying to, they want to study hard, they want to get a good job, they want to, like lift their family out of poverty and all that jazz, right? So like all this like stereotyping was just, complete bullshit, honestly. Yeah, like that was the first thing that really shocked me, I guess, as a culture. How the emphasis on race was like so important. It was crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, that's actually a great way to get into our next topic of conversation is going to be on culture shock. And I also wanted to add that, yeah, I feel the same way too. I actually forgot that. I guess I would consider myself in the diaspora because I'm from Zambia and in South Africa, but I've experienced that too, the whole people really being focused on your accent, and if you're not speaking English in the right accent, you're basically not speaking English to a lot of people.
Exactly.
It
Which
is
is absolute
frustrating.
bullshit.
Yeah, I hate it. But yeah, let's move on to Eka.
Yeah, I mean, so we had from my perspective as a young kid, like it was pretty good life, and then we moved to the States, and the first year, I didn't know English, so it was like that was just it's the best way to learn, and you have to learn it in school. So we learned it pretty quickly. But yeah, I mean, to what Jess was saying, the systemic sort of systemic racism was a thing that I learned as I got older, because I just didn't understand what it was. But U.S. I lived in different parts of the U.S. and it's very segregated. People tend to stick to their own kind, and our family too. And a lot of, folks in my family, they're like anti-Black sentiment was a thing. They're like, people just like, I didn't realize like that sentiment was a thing that existed till we moved to the U.S. Right? Because I don't know if it's movies or TV shows, or how Black folks are portrayed in the U.S. Like that was the thing. My parents, my distant family was like, it's very stereotypical sort of reaction to some of my friends or people that are in the community, and that was the thing. As I was growing up in the States, just learning about like the systemic racism, just sort of the outright bigotry in our community as well, and dealing with that and trying to find my place. And at the same time, like for me, I was like, as a kid growing up in sort of the elementary and middle school and high school systems in the U.S., I was trying to do my best to blend in. And that's something I think that's how I coped, is I just try to like hide my differences as much as possible, because I just didn't know any better. And that's something I talked to my parents about, because they were, they essentially started their life over coming to the U.S. So they were working all the time. So we were definitely like not well off coming to the U.S. at all, just because they were just working all the time. So the kid, myself and my younger sister, my older brother, we kind of tended to ourselves. So trying to figure out sort of how to grow up in the society, it wasn't really comfortable with. It was mostly, at first, I was just trying to hide all my differences away as much as possible, because I was like, that was like the way I can cope and try to get through without dealing with all the different issues as a kid, like racism issues and clique issues and different things, and trying to blend in. And I did that for a long time. I think even into early adulthood, it was just sort of the way I coped, is try to blend in as much as possible. And later in life, like, as I'm kind of been in the game industry for a while, I started to kind of recognize the things that we're doing, and started to talk to other people that were sort of in my similar situation. And we started comparing notes. We're like, oh yeah, we did the same thing. And now we're like trying to be more proactive and kind of owning our culture a lot more. And that's something we can get into later as we get into different topics, but like that's something that I'm a lot more into now, and not afraid of sort of trying to blend in as much. But that was most of my experience growing up, is just trying to not stand out as much as possible.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask Jess and Lou if they have any, or Lou actually rather, if you had any stories of, I guess, trying to blend in, basically assimilation, and culture shock when you are moving around, when you moved to Canada and then the UK.
Yeah, there's definitely like that whole trying to assimilate. It's interesting because I went from Brazil, which is like a very racially diverse population. Pretty much everyone is mixed like me, or they come from themselves come from another diaspora. But that racism is definitely there, but it's very discreet, and they put it out almost as if it's not your race, it's you that is the problem if you're being picked on. So I moved from that to Canada, which I actually, because I stayed there for such a little amount of time, I did not live that at all. I was pretty much inside the house most of the time. I moved in the winter, and then And then like by summer I was moving to the UK. And then in the UK it's a country that does not believe that is racist at all, but it's very. And it was the first time that I actually became conscious about my skin color and my race and like how different I was. It was the first country that I actually, how can I put it? The first country that I actually experienced like blatant racism, compared to Brazil, which was very discreet, and it was very like me thinking that it was myself, but looking back, it was clearly because of how I am. And the assimilation was, it was a different kind of assimilation. When I moved from Brazil to Canada and then to the UK, I was alternative, but I wasn't so alternative. And when I noticed that I was starting being picked on based on where I am and like my skin color and my hair and all of that, I tried to lean on being even more alternative, because I would think that they were picking on me because I looked like a rebellious teenager and not because of who I am. So that was kind of my way of trying to assimilate, because I'm also extremely stubborn person. I'm like, I'm not gonna change my name. I'm not gonna make it easy for anyone to pronounce my name. You're gonna have to deal with my accent. I'm gonna try to improve on things that I don't pronounce like as eloquently or as clearly, but you're gonna have to deal with it. But in another hand, for a really long time, I was going even more intense on my style. So if I was being picked on, it was because of that, not because of me being Brazilian, brown skinned, because I have a different accent, stuff like that. And I have had worked not in the current work, but I have had work issues that even the way that I refer to people, which is a very Latin American way, which is like you say the person's name and then you start talking, even that little small thing got picked on as seen as as an acceptable way of speaking to your coworkers. Or even in Brazil, we're very, very like punctual, we're very structured with work. And I got picked on for that as well. They said, no, you can be more relaxed, you don't need to be the professional. And that kind of stuff made me go more and more, okay, I'm not gonna try to conform even more to your standards, because one thing is me trying to hide my race beyond like on a style, and another thing is you trying to change my work ethics because it makes everyone else look bad. Yeah.
Yeah, I experienced some of that too. I think like I never bothered assimilating fully. Like
Yeah.
I didn't really see the point. And then I remember having a conversation with some people that like they were I think they were from Pakistan or like somewhere in South Asia basically. And I said like, well, aren't you guys, for America, when you say Asian, right? Like they really mean East Asian, but in the UK, if you say Asian, they mean South Asian, right? So they were confused when I said that they were Asian, because I'm like, well, we're on the same continent, right? So you guys are also Asian. So having this type of like distinct slang terms for certain people, it doesn't really make sense to me. And then someone actually, I had a comment that was like, oh, you're very Asian. I'm like, I am Asian. What do you want me to do? It's like, I can't change who I am. I'm not going to change it for you. And I'm just not going to bother, honestly. Like, I think the older I get, the less I care about actually assimilating, because like, why should I change myself basically to fit whatever imaginary standards that other people have, when you don't want to get to know you as a person. And like, we're not monoliths, right? Like, that stereotype where every whatever person from this culture is the same. It's like, if you get to know individuals, like everybody's individual, even if they come from whatever culture. That was like my mindset, I think.
That's a good mindset.
I mean,
I'm
like,
trying to do a lot more right now.
Why am I changing for you? It's ridiculous, like, you're not paying me to do it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I always get growing up here is like, you're from India, right? I was like, no, I'm from that part of the world, but like, that's not where I grew up. Or people will say, well, you're not Asian, you're Indian. I was like, no, it's still Asia. Asia's a big place. People think of,
And people didn't even know where Singapore is. And I was like, okay. So you're telling me my country doesn't exist? Like, all right, bro.
Yeah, I've gotten to the point where random people ask me where like, it doesn't even matter because I'll never see them, right? Like I'll go to the store, it'll be like, where are you from? I'm like, now I say Maryland because that's where I grew up. Because like, who the hell cares? Like, you're never gonna see me. What does it matter? What is your curiosity about? Like, what doesn't matter?
It's like a subtle, oh, you're not really American or Canadian or
Yep.
whatever it is, right? And it's just
Yep.
like
That's all it is, and they don't
Yeah.
realize it, right? People just like ask the dumbest things. They don't realize what they're doing, right? Like,
exactly.
so I just say like Maryland. They're like, where'd you grow up? Maryland. Like, what does it matter? Like, I don't care about where you grow up. I'm never like, you're just a random person that we're not going to be friends or anything. It's like, just go do your shopping.
Yeah, let me get out of my day. Thanks.
Yeah, you're not asking every other white person in the store where they grew up, right? Like,
yeah, basically.
Yeah, that is, I love all these points because that is something which does come up, I guess, no matter where if you go in any place where that has, I guess, colonial history or lots of white people, you have to deal with their interpretation of race, which is very colonial and historical, and it matters too much. Honestly, it matters too much to a lot of other people. I also get tired occasionally, and that's what I love about being in Zambia. That's what I love about Zambia. One of the things I like about being at home is that I'm just me at home. I'm not, I'm just me. I'm not the black person. I'm not the black woman, the black girl. So I just wanted to add that as well.
You want to
and
hear
like
a funny story? So basically, right, like this is part of the cultural difference. So like initially, I think when I came here, like I would describe people by the color of their clothes because it's the most obvious indicator. So I would be saying like, hey, look at that black person over there, because the person is wearing a black shirt. Like I didn't care about what they look like, and everybody was very confused. And I was like, he is wearing a black shirt. Like, get with the program. But it didn't go along well, so I stopped using it. Or even like, look at that. Like if I say, hey, look at that, the red person, the white person, right? I'm usually describing what they're wearing. I'm not describing like what they look like.
That's also one thing, I guess, like that also adds to, I guess, the topic of culture shock. Like when you go to another place and people talk about races differently, or everything is different, and you have to use a different language to communicate about race. So the next topic, the importance of transnational communities. So I believe this refers to, I guess, communities from your home country in the country you're in right now. So could you tell us a bit about your relationship with those? And let's start with Jess.
Transnational communities. I'm not really sure. I do think it's important because I think it's like what I said. I think like everybody kind of needs to feel like they belong, and usually that happens the best in their own groups. But it doesn't mean that you should stay, in your own little bubble. You still need to make effort to like learn about other people's culture and just reach out and just be open-minded. That's kind of what I think. And I think it's also important just because like you need to get, it's not for me personally, but it's like other people need to get used to the presence of having people with different backgrounds around, and just get used to the fact that everybody's just people, that we're not as different as they think. And there's not like this, I think it's just the how am I going to say this? It's like if you have a bigger presence of transnational communities, it kind of emphasizes the fact that they're real people and there's no othering to be had, because like the more you're in contact with them, the more you see them around, you get used to the idea of them as being real. And it kind of relates to this study I read too, where it was saying that like people who move from rural areas, right, they move to the city and they become like more open-minded, or they become like more used to differences because they're not being surrounded by people who look like them all the time. So I think this is this is why this is important. You need to get used to the fact that there are other types of people in the world, and you're not the only type of person like around, basically. Yeah. Lou, what do you think about it? Because you kind of moved to a bunch of different areas.
Yeah, I agree. I think one thing that I've been kind of thriving on ever since I moved out was to be surrounded by people from very different nationalities. I think like every single friend group that I have had so far, it's never like monolithically Brazilian or monolithically British, for example. It has always been like a mishmash of people, and like even if nobody is from South America, I feel so at home because I know that they're gonna understand like we all have differences and we can all like kind of commune on those. And it has felt so far very welcoming to be in this kind of friend group. And in the case of like being in the UK, it kind of almost substitutes having a family, because my family is all in Brazil, my husband's family is all in Canada, so we're kind of, if it can feel kind of lonely sometimes, and having those friends that also come from all over the planet, they're also kind of like lonely, and their families were back in their home countries. We kind of like group into a family together and have like support on holidays and stuff like that whenever we need. So they act so far kind of acted as a family to me, which has been really sweet. Eka?
Yeah, I mean, growing up in school, I didn't have a lot of other Sri Lankan kids. My immediate family, and we had an extended family that lived in the area. So I noticed some of my cousins were strictly all about the community all the time, and they didn't have any other sort of friends outside of that. And I had a different experience, which is I had to, as a brown kid growing up in the East Coast in the U.S., you can flip between the white kids and the black kids really easily. Like you're more accepted. Like you don't have, like, it was pretty segregated even in our high school that had, different types of kids, but like I was able to have sort of a more diverse set of friends. And being an art kid, like people like seeing you draw, so that they just accepted you.
Draw me Naruto.
Like you got a talent, all right, you're accepted. I mean, not that there wasn't racism, but like that was sort of like my experiences. I had a sort of diverse set of friends. Not a lot of Sri Lankan friends, but as I got older, especially in games, like I have a lot of sort of South Asian friends that I could talk to, and again, like I have friends. One of my writers, she's from India and lives in London, and I have another friend from different parts of India. Like, it's not a monolithic. We're not all have the same South Asian experience, so it's been good to sort of compare notes and talk about the differences. And I think it's healthy. I don't think it's healthy even coming to the U.S. if I was just in a Sri Lankan community the whole time, because I have seen that, and there's a lot of anti-Black sentiment in that community, in the South Asian community, that I don't think is. I don't think they're seeing that because they're not around.
Yeah, the same here.
Yeah, diverse
Yeah, same
set
for
of folks.
the summer. Yeah.
Does that, actually, no, before we move on, I wanted to find out, Lou, you're from a big country. Is it easy to find Brazilians and relate to Brazilians in different parts of the world? Because Brazil is so big and diverse. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm kind of lucky that I come from a part of Brazil which has the biggest concentration of the population. So whenever I go out, when I meet a Brazilian that is outside of Brazil, they're usually from two places, São Paulo or Rio de Janeiro. Sometimes they're from the Northeast, which is like a much poorer region, which is where my mom is from. So I also can relate to them. But Brazil is, I don't know how we manage to, the entire country kind of manages to relate to each other very much. I think the biggest contrast is between the extreme south and the extreme north. I think because when you meet someone from the same place as you, when you're outside of your country, you kind of try to find common ground and like similarities because you kind of miss home. So even if it's someone from, I'm from Sao Paulo, if someone from Amapá, which is super far away, we're gonna still try to relish like the things that we have in common, like sometimes cuisine, sometimes telenovelas and stuff like that. There is a big thing, which is usually Brazilians that go live outside of Brazil, especially in Europe. They're very, very right wing, like almost outright fake news kind of people. And that's for me, it's when the like being able to relate to them kind of stops, because that's not where I lean at all. And but in Brazil, there's like three things that people try to not discuss to be polite with each other, which I don't agree on, by the way, which is religion, football, and politics. I'm all about discussing, especially politics. But when they go outside of Brazil, they kind of try to feel where you are and then try to like talk about the president or their like political views. But that's usually where it stops. Like me being able to relate to them or even wanting to keep talking to them, really. Don't know if anyone else has like a similar thing.
Yeah, something similar, but it's also a bit weird. I don't think I'm qualified to talk about this anyway. Yeah, so I'm Singaporean Chinese, right? So there's like a lot of conflict within the Chinese diaspora themselves, because there's the mainland Chinese faction, there's like the Southeast Asian Chinese faction, there's the Asian American Canadians. So there's like a lot of stuff going on. And usually what I notice is that if you meet some like everybody because they grew up in different areas, right? So everybody has very different values. And then usually if you meet somebody from, like if they're from mainland China, sometimes their views are not your own, right? Because like some people in mainland China, they believe that all Chinese people belong to the mainland. So you can see where there a lot of conflict like comes from there, right? Like because first of all, I have never grown up there, so I don't understand. Okay, obviously some values are shared, right? But a lot of the bigger stuff, like I may understand it, but you know, I did not grow up in it. I don't understand any of it. So I'm like kind of the in between like I guess people who immigrated as kids, or if they're second gen, like East Asian, American or Canadian. I'm kind of like in between where like I understand a bit of it, but not fully. So it's a bit of a weird position to be in, because I can't really say on anything that they relate to, but I kind of get it at the same time. But it's hard to explain this to people who've never really experienced such a thing. Like there's a huge cultural difference, right? Where there's even subtle stuff like how do you greet your elders, or how do you serve tea, or like who eats first, you know, all that kind of like cultural stuff that a lot of those things get kind of thrown away when you're North America, because they don't really matter as much. But if you're in like Southeast Asia or even any East Asian country, then those types of manners, they matter a lot. So it's a bit, it's not really, yeah, it's a mismatch of everything, like both like cultural wise, but also politics wise, where I can't really talk about it because, you know, this is like a ticking time bomb, right? Where like there's some Chinese people do believe that like Hong Kong belongs to the mainland. Now, obviously the Hong Kongers don't believe that, and that's where, you know, it's hard to discuss things without it getting heated, basically. So I try to stay away from it, I guess. Like I don't try to talk about it because my own position is very complicated. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's interesting. And Eka, do you meet a lot of people from Sri Lanka in your wherever you travel? And how do you relate to them?
I haven't met too many. I mean, I think I know 2 people in the Western gaming scene. that are Sri Lankan. I'm sure there are plenty, but like I've met more people through Twitter and things like that around the world now. No, I haven't met a lot of folks, but I also don't shy away from talking about politics because I've been in studios in the past where the heads of the studios are like, "You don't talk politics," and it's just like that's because they just had very conservative opinions, so they didn't want to have any other sort of opinions in the studio, and that's not the way I run our studio. We're like we talk about politics all the time. I don't know how you cannot. I mean, not talking about politics is a privilege that white folks have in the States, and
Yeah.
or I guess any dominant culture, but like what's going on with the world right now, what's going on in politics in the U.S. like affects all of us, and I don't know how you can not talk about it. So I don't shy away from it anymore, like at all. And, but yeah, in terms of Sri Lankans, I think there's 22 million of us in the back in Sri Lanka, and there's a bunch of communities like Toronto and the UK and New York that have sort of pockets of it. I met some here in the West Coast in Portland because a lot of folks from India, Sri Lanka work at Intel. So there's a lot of South Asian folks work at Microsoft. So I met a handful of people, but I'm not in the community as much because this is not a huge community out here, as far as I know. So.
All right. And before we actually get on to talking about what this all means to you guys in the games industry, I just wanted to say I found it very interesting, Lou, when you said the three things you try not to talk about is religion, football, and politics. Like football's right in the middle there.
Football second.
It's such a gigantic thing in Brazil. It's like there is family drifts if a part of the family supports one club and another family supports another club, which happened in my family. So it's the good thing is that I don't like football, so it's not something that I discuss at all.
Wow, that is very interesting. And yeah, let's move on to the I guess the bigger picture of all this. In how does all this relate to relate to your experience in the games industry and the representation there? So yeah, let's start with Jess.
It's kind of related to what I was talking about before. Like a lot of people's experiences with Chinese people are like Chinese people from the mainland and then from China, and then so when they meet a Chinese person, just immediately assume that they're from the mainland, which it's not true. Because I've met people with very different backgrounds. I had a classmate who she's Chinese, but she's from Panama, so her first language is Spanish. So like it just seems like we tend to get put into a box, I guess, and it's very frustrating to work to try to break out of that box in a sense. Like you're always trying to. And I think this goes back to what Echo was saying too about like the cultural influences that the dominant culture has, like white people have, and like the subconscious and conscious biasness that culture brings, including the entertainment that is being made and the media that's being made. Like I feel like as like people of color, we're always just trying to fight against this mental image of what is a competent individual, and then for a lot of people, that competent individual in mind is always a white dude. Sometimes with a beard or not, but like you're always trying to fight against that box, and you're always trying to get recognition, and sometimes it's just really hard. So, I mean, I think if there were more diverse people or people from different backgrounds in the game industry in like higher positions in the greater quantity, it could help like lessen that type of perspective and change the subconscious biasness that like success is always seen in the form of a white dude. Like I'm pretty sure we've all read stories or heard stories of, this guy, he's fresh out of high school, he did not, he's wealthy, and then he just so happens to meet somebody who reminds him of himself when he was younger, and that's how he got his like leg up, right? I think like that's something that we have to consciously fight against, and it's very hard. I'm not sure this answered the question. It's kind of just rambled on, but Eka, do you want to take over? Take me away from my rambling.
So I've been in the games industry.
It was a very important ramble.
It was a great ramble. I've been in games for a long time. I started at Bethesda when I was 19. and I looked at all the sort of the teams. I've been in 4 different companies before I started Outer Loop, so I looked at all the teams and the diversity in those teams, and I think I was the 1 or 2 of Black or brown folks on those teams. It's 98% white males. So I think, you know, when I finally felt confident 3 years ago, I was like, okay, I really, it was more out of anger and spite that I wanted to start a studio just to kind of see different sort of stories being told, and also, you know, diverse in teams and experiences and gender. Also, yeah, mostly a lot of dudes too, all my teams. And so for us, like part of starting the studio was also like to have different people with, you know, gender diversity, but experiences and people from different cultures. So we're fully remote from, you know, US to Australia to India, a couple of Canadians as well. And our first game is an anti-colonial game about falcon hunting. It's called Falcon Age. So that was like a story I wanted to tell, and it has a lot of characters from South Asian culture and themes. And so like, that's my challenge right now, is like, how do we tell stories that are different, but also most of my audience is it's still gonna be predominantly white in the US, and that's most of our audience right now. So I'm happy that people are like liking the things we're doing. And as we're working on our second game, which is also more about the culture and arranged marriage and things like that, as we're pitching right now in the middle of COVID, like it's been interesting to see that people are like responding to it because it is fresh and different. And I see like, I don't think I could have done this 10 years ago even, or 5 years ago. Just the market is different. Like there's a lot more opportunity, and there's been enough white dude stories out there that people are looking for something different. Even though everyone I pitched to, I started pitching in February before sort of everything shut down. And of like the 15, 16 partners I pitched to, all but one of them were white male, right? Like that they're the first line of like from publisher to funding sources. So it's interesting. It's like it's changing, and they're actually like, I pitched different projects, and the one that they were interested in, or the one that was I thought they would be least interested in. So I was surprised in a positive way that people are interested in different stories. At the same time, like it has to be put together in a way that is like has to be engaging. It has to be visually appealing. Like visuals still is the thing that's selling regardless of what you're pitching. So like that's sort of my way in right now, is like tell stories I want to tell, but package it in a way that's like, if people that don't care about it still can enjoy the game, I'm fine with it until it changes at some point. But like that's like, I'm gonna slowly erode away at it till we can do different stories and different cultural stories and games.
And I do think like allies are important, because like we need, you know, we need the support, right? Like you said, like they're the first line of whatever it is that we encounter. So it's like we need them to help us, because usually they're the key to persuading other people like, hey, this is, you know, it's cool to be open-minded, this is okay, like it's just a reassuring presence or whatever it is. Like but yeah, like I don't think like being like overly harsh or being like overly angry will help. We're all angry, right? I get that, but it's like we do need, like sometimes it's, if you can find people to help you out, it's often better, because you know they can spread that help. I guess they can spread the open-mindedness to the people within their own community who may not be as open-minded. So that's kind of the thing, and it is like a line of balance, because you know, like I'm sure we've all been there, right? We're like the token, you know, person of color, everything, they have problems with their culture, they come to us. So it's like you're there explaining whatever this word means. So yeah, it is tiring. You're not gonna say like, you know, it's an easy job, but sometimes it's unavoidable, which I don't like. It should really be like hire an actual person to do it, but you know, that's like a pipe dream, I think, right now.
I will say, when people come to me now on Twitter will like want like basic 101 racism stuff, I'm like, dude, like just
how do you make rice, bro? Teach
like
me.
no, like go like no, more about like dealing with, you know, like I don't know, like being a brown person, what is it like, you know, or like basic stuff. I was like, just Google stuff before you come talk to me. Like do your own research. Like I used to be like you said, the person that trying to explain and do all the things, and I was like, that's a lot of tax on my time,
Yeah.
where I have to do the basic 101 version of diversity, right? Like,
Mhm.
there's enough stuff out there. Do your own research, and then we can talk about in more detail or more specifics. But like, I'm not dealing with that anymore.
Yeah, exactly. This is like, sure, we're here to help, but I'm not your teacher, right? Like if you're really genuine about wanting to make a difference, then you can make the effort to learn about stuff on your own. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I think because I immigrated so much later. Like I was an adult already working in games. That was, even when I got started in games, that was a huge barrier of entry because I didn't have access to to educational sources that people in North America or Europe have. I didn't speak English. I have now noticed I was muted. Sorry about that.
No worries.
What I started mentioning is that because I immigrated like a bit later in life, I was already working in games as a freelance. I don't know why it keeps muting me. Let me see. Should I start over or can I pick up from a point? Is it working?
Yeah, we can hear you now. You can start over.
Okay. So since I immigrated like a little bit later in life, and I was already working in games, and I was already graduated, I was working as a freelancer. I think there were different barriers because I needed a visa to work outside of Brazil. That was already like a huge effort to even be able to get a job that was not freelance, because apparently you can be good enough to direct or lead a team as an artist, as a freelancer, but the moment that you actually need help to stay in a country, then you're no longer like as worth it as you were before. And yeah, that was like that huge barrier of entry of even being able to get jobs, because we didn't have the same educational resources and the same language skills. When I moved to Canada, I already knew English, but it was not good enough to be well understood.
You moved to the French side, right?
Yeah, and I went to the French side and I spoke very little French. And when I tried to speak French, I was mostly ignored, or they would try to correct me at every single word, so I couldn't actually communicate. So that was that. And then once I broke the barrier of being able to get a job, that was also a very clear message of, we hired you, but we're not here for the cultural baggage that you're bringing and your differences. We want you to fully assimilate, leave your entire culture, your way of being, your work ethics behind, and be like us. So that was that willingness of hiring immigrants, but that was not that willingness of working with immigrants per se. So that was a big thing, like big thing for me. And I can mention as well, like either Echo or Jess, I don't remember now, but it mentions about the like being the token person to be consulted. And there's also like being the token person of, look, we have people of color, we're a safe place to work.
Oh, I have bought at those photography sessions. Like I'm staying out of that buy.
Yeah. Or like we have queer people, this person that is all our tokens at the same time, that we're super safe, when that wasn't actually the case. And so yeah, that was a big difficulty. And it's weird, but it feels a bit lonely too, to be in situations that you're very clearly so different from everyone else in your work environment, that I kind of felt lost many times. I didn't know who to ask for guidance. And yeah, I guess for me that was the big thing, both the barrier to entry and then like the complete lack of willingness to work with an immigrant after you hired that immigrant.
Yeah, there's a lack of safety there where like they just constantly make you feel like you don't belong. And like you said, like you can't ask for help. Like, you can't just talk to anybody. And I think like that's something that does need to change with the representation part, because just hiring people is not enough, right? You gotta want to like retain them and promote them and train them and all that jazz. Like it's like what Lou said, you can't just like hire someone and just point to them as like, you know, you're one token or whatever. Like it doesn't work that way anymore. I think a lot of people see through that now, like especially with like Twitter, like everybody's on fire. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm glad things are changing. And yeah, we've been talking for a while. And generally, I'm glad you guys expressed your frustrations, because I'm learning from you guys as well. And it's unfortunate that like no matter how hard you or how much you assimilate into a space, if you're seen as a foreigner, like you're almost always having to filter your perspective and your experiences to be palatable and marketable to basically white people. Or yeah, it's really frustrating.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I hate that. Yeah. But I mean, before we go, would you guys like to say anything? Do you guys have anything encouraging to share? Or it doesn't even have to be encouraging. Would you guys like to share something and tell us where we can find you online, if you want us to find you online? So yeah, Jess, can you start?
Oh dear. I don't really have anything to say except that I do believe it's getting better. It's just that this transition will be long because we need to drag people into progression. That's basically it. You can find me on Twitter at Changeling, ChengeEling. I think that's how I spell it. You can look at my work at changeling.art, if the same spelling. And yeah, it's been a pleasant panel. I've enjoyed like talking to my co-panelists and learning about the stories too. So thank you for the invite. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for sharing your experience with us. And Lou, would you be able to tell us anything encouraging or anything you'd like to share, and tell us where we can find you?
Yeah, so I have like a tiny bit of encouraging piece, I guess. Just as Ekan mentioned, he has his own very international, very diverse studio, and there's more of those showing up as people like me and him get kind of fed up with the situation that the games industry is in and was in. For example, I have founded Bunny Hug with my husband. We are a very incredibly international team. We have people from the UK, Canada, Philippines, Australia, just as like Eka mentioned for his studio himself. And I know of other studios that are doing the same, that they're focusing on being diverse studios, and they're focusing on being international, or even focusing on like telling the stories of where they're from and stories that haven't been told yet. That, for example, there is Silver Rain Games in the UK as well. They're very recent and can't wait to see what they're gonna do. And yeah, so if you wanna check out Bunny Hug, it's Bunny Hug Games on Twitter, and you can find me at Violacus, so VIIOLACUS on Twitter, Instagram, everywhere. It's pretty much the same thing. I post art sometimes when I'm not under heavy NDA, and hopefully we're gonna announce our game soon.
Yay!
Yeah.
Hey, exciting. And Eka, last but not least, anything encouraging?
Thanks for having me on this panel. It's been great talking and sharing. I think the change is going to happen, but it's not going to happen by itself. And the things that we're talking about and pushing for, and that's what's going to cause the change to happen. And the game industry is all about success. So like, if you have a game that is successful, people notice, and they'll start to sort of see, especially with the type of stories we're going to tell and type of games we're making, and see the diversity, and like that shows sort of the platform holders and publishers and people that have money are willing to invest in other other types of games if we see that more diverse games are more successful. And that's one of the things I'm doing myself, is starting to, like, all the things I've learned over the years, I'm trying to like help other smaller indies that are just starting with just the basic stuff of like, who do I talk to, and where do I pitch to, and making connections. Those are things that I'll happily give back, because I've had people that have been more established that have helped me, and I think that's just like, that's the way we can improve the situation, is just help other folks. You can find me at Ekanaut, EKANAUT on Twitter. Spend a lot of time there, and Outer Loop Games on Twitter as well. I'm excited for the future. Like I think like you can't stay in this industry too long if you're real bitter and don't contribute to it. Like again, like you got to be the change you want to see. So it's I'm still passionate about making games, and we're excited about the up and coming things. And I see a lot of great indies. The great thing about being all remote now is I'm able to hire people all over the place. They don't have to pick up their life and move to another country or a new place. Cost of living is easier. Like, people can be wherever they want, and we can still make games that way. And we're seeing a lot of the AAA teams are also learning this. Like, you don't have to be in one building or be in one expensive city to make games anymore. You can do that from anywhere. That's the positive of this COVID thing right now, is like people are able to still be productive and be able to, and the remote access also gives more diverse individuals more access to these teams and funding too. So yeah, I'm excited.
Just to add on to like Ekka's point, like if you're an artist and you want to help, like, or whoever, right? Like if you're a dev, like what really helps is that you're in the position to recommend like people who normally don't have access to these type of openings, like what Ekka and Lou have done. Like they open up their own studios and they're hiring people from like non-typical backgrounds or whatever the hell we expect, right? So yeah, I'm kind of doing that too. Like, I'm just trying to like help push people who may not have access to these opportunities because remote and COVID and everything like makes it a great time for to hire different types of people, basically.
Yeah, definitely. And I completely forgot to say thank you so much for having me. It has been a pleasure to be in this panel and hear everyone's stories. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing. Honestly, I'm very glad that we ended with this, because it's so positive, and you can't see me, but I'm really smiling because I'm like, yeah, like it's really exciting. Like, no, the future does seem really exciting. It does seem like we can take advantage of like the situation right now and incorporate more people from around the world in the industry. So yeah, thank you guys so much for sharing your experiences, and I'm sure people will enjoy learning from them as well. So yeah, that's the end of this panel. Yay.
Yay.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.